But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in a life and in the strength of love. And we have found our need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us, and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder and
mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, and the great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Afternoon and welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Congregation online into this service of remembrance, this celebration of the life of Beverly Warner. I invite you to greet your neighbors in the chat and share a bit about where you're joining us from and how you knew Beverly. Today we gather just as people have gathered for thousands of years at the death of a loved one, a member of the family, the tribe, to mourn and to grieve. We gather in this time made sacred by our presence and the memories of Beverly and the holy known by many names in which we live, move, and have our being. We gather from different places. We are in different stages of our journey through life. Our paths are varied, and we look at life in different ways. We also have different ways that we process our grief. What we have in common is that Beverly's life has been woven into each of our lives in many ways, and our experiences of her now are transformed into memories afloat in a great sea of love. It is in this spirit that we gather. It is in this spirit that we begin this celebration of Beverly Warner's life. In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, it is customary to open our time together with the lighting of a chalice, like the one right behind me. This flame we light is an ancient symbol of transformation, and the chalice that holds it is a symbol of community and service. As we light the chalices of our heart today, I bring to you these words by Christine Robinson. In our time of grief, we light a flame of sharing, the flame of ongoing life and love that endures beyond death. In this time, when we search for understanding and serenity in the face of loss, we light this sign of our quest for truth, meaning, and community. I'd like to read to you a reminiscence from Beverly's brother, Gil. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to read his words in total. Beverly, Bev, is my sister. Older by 7 years, she came into this world way too early. Our mother told me that Peanut arrived sometime in the afternoon of April 10th, 1927. She made her entrance way too early in less than 6 months from creation, weighing only 1 3/4 pounds. Bev's chance of survival was poor. Bev clung to life, but she wouldn't have lasted long without a miracle. And whether it was a miracle of coincidence or something else, that Brooklyn, New York hospital had just become the sole owner of the very first primitive incubator in New York City. And Bev was its first occupant. She remained in the hospital under continuous medical observation and care for many months. Finally, she was able to return home, and she came home with her hips in a plaster cast from the waist down. Less than a year later, she was a happy, healthy, active child, and 7 years later, a brother entered her life. A few months after Gil arrived, the Gordon family moved to Delaware Avenue in Norwalk, Connecticut, where Bev attended Tracy Elementary School, skipped a grade, went to Central Junior High School, and began Norwalk High School before world events uprooted the entire family. Gil says it was early 1942, a few months after the United States was thrust into World War II, that our father, a chemical engineer, and slightly too old for Uncle Sam to put in uniform, was drafted into the Navy to apply his expertise in electroplating to improve Navy aircraft engines. He was assigned to the Advanced Flight School in Pensacola, Florida, where Navy pilots completed their training. Gil says that their dad rode the train to Pensacola first, and then a few months later, he, his mother, and Bev loaded into the family's 1938 Chevy along with their dog to make their way from Norwalk to Pensacola with just a small mishap in Georgia, with rain, a muddy road, and a ditch. But everyone arrived safely, and many period songs were added to the family's singing list. The family found lodging in a single room on the second floor of an old plantation house, and Bev entered Pensacola High School as her brother finished third grade at the local yes ma'am, no ma'am elementary school. They were one of many Yankees from the North. Bev continued at Pensacola High School and helped out at the USO, dancing, serving soft drinks, lemonade, coffee, cookies, and cupcakes to very young homesick sailors. And several of those sailors asked young Bev for a date. Sometimes she agreed. No meeting place. They had to come to the house to meet her parents. And for years, Gil says she would receive small gifts in the mail from some of those dates, usually postmarked from Hawaii, and letters stamp marked from US ships. Beverly graduated Pensacola High School and entered Tallahassee School for Women the next year. And in May of 1945, VE, Victory in Europe Day, came and went. Bev returned from college for the summer, and about that time, the Navy released their dad. Gil says, we packed up the 1938 Chevy, and the four of us headed back to Norwalk to pick up our lives from before the war. During the long drive, we took turns selecting old and new songs to sing. Gil says that it was hard to find a place to live, but Beverly's mom finally found a 2-bedroom with a kitchen and bath above a 3-car garage. And that's when Bev enrolled in a new college for September. She took the New York, New Haven, and Hartford train to NYU every weekday morning, returning in time for dinner. Gil says that finally their mom discovered a long, empty half of a duplex in South Norwalk, where they moved in with their very few possessions. Items were in storage or had been in storage since 1942. And they were delivered as Bev was reintroduced to all of her childhood toys and dolls. And the next year, Bev renewed her college education at UConn, the University of Connecticut. As this was happening, Gil says that their mother's 3 younger brothers completed their service in the Army and Navy. And when they came home, they went to their mother's parents' house where there were get-togethers that their grandmother hosted at their apartment in Coney Island, New York. And Gil says that Bev referred to those get-togethers as eating good times. Bev's grandparents' small apartment was filled with aunts and uncles and cousins and more cousins. And it was, as Gil says, boisterous and noisy, and each random group talking so loud to be heard. And one particular evening, Gil says, as the evening grew late, Bev and Gil were taken to their mom's sister's house in another part of Brooklyn, where cousins bunked together, and Bev stayed with her friend Elaine on the other side of the duplex. Bev and Elaine stayed friends for many years and had lost touch when Bev moved to Bethesda, Maryland. But in, as Gil says, an unbelievable twist of fate many years later, Bev, while in her 70s, rediscovered Elaine living in Bethesda. Both were widows. They reestablished their friendship, communicating and seeing each other on occasion until Elaine passed a few years later. Gil returns in his reflection to Bev's senior year at UConn and states she had successfully reached her last year at UConn and looked forward to graduation. And it was early during the first semester on a Friday night when one of her classmates' friends visited her dorm room and explained that she was having a small party and was a girl short. Bev wasn't a party type and declined, but the friend assured Bev that the party was only for fun and meeting new people. And Bev didn't want to disappoint a friend, Gil says, so she finally accepted. And it was at that party she met an ardent admirer, an electrical engineering junior attending UConn on the GI Bill. Ed Warner and Bev Gordon were married in June of the following year, shortly after Bev graduated with a bachelor's degree in bacteriology. Gill says that his parents bought their first house in Norwalk the year before Bev was married, and the couple moved in, taking her brother's larger bedroom upstairs. Bev's dad gave Ed the 1938 Chevy and purchased a used 1939 Pontiac. And Ed would drive from Yukon to Norwalk on most every Friday night, returning on Sunday night, as long as the weather allowed. When Ed graduated with honors, he was offered a teaching position at Columbia University in New York. And Bev was able to find an apartment close to the university, returning often to visit her parents. Bev and Ed continued to return to their parents' house in Norwalk and lived there for about a year while Ed commuted back and forth to his new employer, Barnes Engineering in Stamford, Connecticut. And Gill says that one day, Bev told their parents that she and Ed had decided to find a home of their own. And a few years later, when they moved into their new home, Steve Warner was born. The years passed, and then one day, Bev told Mom and Dad, these are Gill's words, that they decided to pursue Ed's dream of striking out on his own as an electrical engineer sales rep. With his professional engineering license secure, Bev and Ed sold the house and chose to live close to Washington, D.C. Ed had convinced several Virginia companies he could represent them as a sales rep and find buyers. He arrived with several signed contracts. He and Bev worked long hours, and Ed traveled often. The business was an immediate success, and they bought a house in Bethesda, Maryland. They incorporated the business, Ed as CEO and president, and Bev as the secretary and treasurer. Ed traveled and secured many new clients, and Bev watched the store. She handled all the finances and legal aspects of the business. They traveled often, had vacation homes in North Carolina and Naples, Florida, and enjoyed their life together for many years until Ed passed. Gill says that he and Bev shared the loss of Ed, their mother, their father, and the passing of time as they both aged. No longer able to travel, Gill says that he and Bev emailed and spoke often on the phone. The last time was a few days before Bev departed.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends
I'm going to read this on behalf of Rabina Kakaragusi. To my beautiful soul, Ms. Warner, I hope wherever you're resting in peace. I remember that day in March, 8.5 years ago. It would have been 9 years this last March, like yesterday, when I knocked on your door and asked, who am I going to take care of? You laughed and you told me, it's you. When you told me your age, I was surprised because of your youthful looking appearance, and you said it's good family genes. You welcomed me into your home, although for the first few weeks, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to manage working here? Because you were so particular with how you did your things, very clean. You wanted everything in order. I persisted without knowing that was the best decision of my life. The bond we forged, the lessons I learned, and the love I felt is unbelievable. We cried together, laughed together, explored all the malls and eating places in Maryland when you were still able to do so. I am missing you in all our adventures. You were introverted like me. People could mistake you as proud or antisocial, but if someone took the time to get to know you, you were the most beautiful soul I've ever known. Being with Ms. Warner, I learned so many things. I learned how to forgive and move on. You would sometimes get mad, but a few minutes later you were talking and not carrying any anger. You taught me to be generous, although you used to caution me to save my money. You always thought of others and how you could help. Your kindness was so touching. There was no word racism in your mind. We ate at the same table and shared everything together. I will miss you forever, Ms. Warner. I thank you for loving us and trusting me. When I brought the other two ladies to work with me, you didn't hesitate. Thank you for introducing me to your beautiful family, which you love so much. Your son, Steve, and wife, Veronica, you instilled in them how to care for others. Karen and family, thanks for recommending me. You always kept updating us about Karen's girls, where they were going to school, and how they are growing fast. You always checked your computer for Mike's jokes and shared them with us. And also your brother, with whom you used to have long talks. Lastly, your grandchildren, whom you loved, and I could see the excitement when you got the great grandbaby. I'll miss our political debates and Hollywood gossip. God knows how I am missing you every day. I never knew that the love someone shows you can impact your life so hard. I still cry, but I know you're resting in peace. You will always be remembered, and I'm very honored you gave me a chance to work with you, for you. I knew you knew I loved you to death, and I did my job 100% with love. I tried to do a video, but I couldn't because your memory brings me tears all the time. Rest in peace, my beloved boss, Ms. Beverly Warner, and know you are very much loved. I am praying for your soul every day. My almighty God gave you eternal life and reward. All the good seeds you planted in this earth, and it's time for your harvest in heaven.
It's almost coming to 3 months as I make this video that Miss Warner left us. Sometimes it feels like a dream and that Miss Warner is no more. That you wake up in the morning, you won't hear her voice, you won't talk to her, the things we used to do together. And so we are so much used to rushing into suburban hospital, and before you know it, you're back home. But the good Lord had other plans for you, and I know you're in a better place. Miss Warner, I thank you for a lot. I thank you for the love. I thank you for your understanding. You're selfless. You are a unique human being that you made everybody feel so special. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for caring. I miss you so much. I miss you so much. I'll always love you. Thank you for making such a big impact on my life and my family. I'll always treasure the almost 6 years that we spent together. I love you from the bottom of my heart. I wish things would be different. But we are trying to come to terms that you were no more. And we'll always treasure those moments. We love you so much. You've left such a big... I wish I could have words. Such an emptiness in our lives. But we'll always treasure every single moment we spend together. Love you. And may your sweet soul rest in peace. Sleep with the angels, Miss Warner. I love you. I love you.
Hello, family and friends. For those who do not know me, I am Michael Gordon, Bev's nephew. My family and I live in San Jose, California. What I wanted to share with you today are a few thankful thoughts about Aunt Bev. To start, Bev and I were not only aunt and nephew, but also pen pals. Pen pals for nearly 50 years. When I was still in grade school, I would receive postcards from Bev and my Uncle Ed every time they would travel to the Caribbean. I saved many of these postcards, some now old and a bit faded, yes, but I did save those postcards even after all these years. In those days past, I would receive letters and written correspondence from Bev, and I would write letters back. I will admit that when I was very young, many of my early letters were simply thank you notes for birthday and Christmas presents, but as I got older, the letters were not just thank yous. In more recent times, Bev and I relied more on email than using pen and paper. But there were times when we would still correspond by pen and paper mail, such as this letter from Bev from August 2015. The letter included an update that Steve and Veronica were leaving for Florida the next week to go scuba diving. With the usual mother's concern, Bev said that she told Steve to watch out for sharks. A big thank you to Steve for providing Bev with email many years ago. Over the past 10 years, Bev and I emailed on a weekly and sometimes even daily basis. A high point of each week for me would be to receive an email or two from Bev with the latest goings-on. We would share lots of thoughts, opinions, and perspectives, as well as the usual day-to-day latest events. So being pen pals over all these years was a wonderful way to keep in touch and keep our lives connected. Even better than being pen pals, though, were the more recent times when my wife Jennifer and my kids Sky and Liam were fortunate enough to travel across the U.S. to Maryland and visit in person with Bev. 10 years ago, when the kids were very young, Sky was 3 and Liam was only 1.5, we decided it was time to hop on a plane and visit. So we cashed in all our flyer miles and traveled to Maryland in first-class seats. The kids still remember the big wide seats on the plane where they could sit cross-legged as we flew out and looked forward to visiting with Aunt Bev. The several visits we made to Maryland over the last 10 years to see Bev always included lots of reminiscing and conversation, a lot of laughter, a lot of hugs, and a lot of what are now fond and loving memories. No words can express how much we miss Aunt Bev. We are so grateful that she was my aunt and treasured pen pal all these years. We will always remember Bev's voice, her smile, and her laughter, and so every time we think of her, we will smile too.
For those of you who don't know me, I am Beverly's daughter-in-law, Veronica. I was honored to be welcomed with open arms into Beverly's family, not only by Beverly, but by both of her parents too. When my stepdad passed away, Beverly also welcomed my mother into the family. They spoke several times a week and they enjoyed each other very much. My mom always said Beverly didn't have an ounce of guile in her soul, and that was the truth. For such a sweet, petite, unassuming woman, Beverly had the most kind, loving, and generous heart. In August 2008, my mother passed away, and then 20 days later, Beverly's mom, who insisted I call her grandma, passed away too. This was a very sad, tumultuous time for all of us. I told Beverly that if my mom was here, she would say she had to go to heaven first so that she could open wide the pearly gates to welcome Frida in. Whenever Beverly was missing her mom after that, I would tell her, don't worry, both of them are up there telling God what to do. She would laugh uproariously because we both knew our mothers were headstrong Leos. One thing I will always be thankful for is that I knew how to make her laugh. There should never be a doubt in anyone's mind that Beverly loved to laugh. Look at all those pictures of her smiling. In every single picture, she looks so happy. That's how I hope we will all remember her, happy and smiling.
Hi, I'm Steve, Deb's son. I remember growing up in a household filled with love with both my parents and nearby grandparents. I recall many happy snapshots from when we lived in Norwalk, Connecticut, which was my first home. The times when my mom and I waited for my father to come home from business trips, and we played Monopoly until he arrived. He never did finish a game. And then there was the time, this in the days when people dried clothes on clotheslines, after freezing rain when we went outside and my mother started dancing with the frozen clothes. She could be quite the ham when she wanted to be. At that tender age, I was a handful. At 3, I think, I had a playpen in the backyard. Mom had put me out there and then had gone inside to do something. I decided I'd had enough of captivity, and being the son of an engineer, I decided to unscrew the wing nuts to open up the playpen and go for a walk. Fortunately, this was only to the neighbor's yard behind us. Seeing my mother in the yard, looking very upset, the neighbor saw me and walked me up to our backyard where my relieved mother waited. It got worse. I had a hamster named Charlie who I would take out of his cage and play with or just hold. One day, I just set him on the sofa and then forgot he was there. The next day, I went to take him out of his cage, but he, of course, was not there. My mother turned the house upside down looking for him, but to no avail. Finally, we were sitting on the sofa watching TV, a Victrola, by the way, when Charlie just waltzes out of the sofa cushions. My mother lifted the cushions to find that Charlie had made himself a nice home from what he chewed away from the sofa's innards. I got in big trouble for that, although in later years we laughed about it. Then there was the Venetian blind surgery that I did, and also the goldfish incident in the Chinese restaurant after we had moved to Maryland. Although my mother did have a tempter, she soon got over it. Her love for me was always a comfortable and constant presence, even when she had to put up with me as a teenager. She was also a great teacher. Take baking and cooking, for example. She was always a terrific baker and taught me so much about that. She kept it up into her late 80s. Here's how good she was. She had baked some chocolate banana bread, and one night I warmed it up and shared it with my son, Jonathan. He took one bite, looked at me and said, "Grandma should sell this." It was that good. Cooking, on the other hand, took her a while to get to the same level as baking. She finally got there when I was about 15, and then she got fantastic there too. I learned a lot here too. As she'd been educated as a microbiologist, when I had a sixth grade science project, she stepped right up to the plate and taught me enough microbiology to deliver a very well received project. This was actually a solid foundation and a boost to eventually build my scientific expertise in college, graduate school, and then my years as a practicing scientist. Eventually, grandchildren came, and she was a terrific grandmother to Jonathan and Samantha as they grew up. So many memories here, baking cookies with the kids, feeding them, the airplane routine when she was feeding Jonathan, etc. She also loved the pictures of her great granddaughter Ellie and loved spending time with my cousins and their children. When the cataclysm occurred with my father's passing, and before Wally was sick, it was time for me to become her protector. She gradually depended more and more on me, which as her son was my joy and privilege to do so. And I had considerable spousal help with this. We did the best we could to make her final years comfortable, stress-free, and most importantly, feeling the love. I think we succeeded. I miss her every day, but the hole in our hearts gets better every day. She had always promised that she'd come back to haunt us. And the front lights by the front door of her house do some mysterious things. Sometimes one is on or the other. Sometimes both are on or off. Coincidence? I believe that she's still watching over us and just reminding us that she's here. Love you, Mom.
bring to you these words by Jan Richardson. Let us agree for now that we will not say the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have this pain than to have done without this love. Let us promise we will not tell ourselves that time will heal the wound when every day our waking opens it anew. Perhaps for now, it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart so broken can go on beating as if it were made for precisely this, as if it knows the only cure for love is more of it, as if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still, as if it trusts that its own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing we cannot begin to fathom, but will save us nonetheless. As we go forward from this time of remembering and grieving together, let us also remember the memories of celebration and the ways in which that by sharing our stories today in the Zoom reception that the family is offering and during the times in which we gather together, that we remember, that we bring together the very best of the joy and the humor and the love and the wit and the values and the examples of good living that Beverly instilled in each of us. Let us go forward with love. Let us go forward with celebration, and let us go forward transforming our grief into inspiration for living a life well lived. May it be so. Amen and blessed be.